My daughter burst through the front door, and I heard her footsteps stop the moment she reached the hallway. I was sitting on a folding cot in the utility room off the kitchen, wedged between the water heater and a wall of old cardboard boxes, wrapped in an old moving blanket that smelled like mildew. 64 years old, 31 years as a structural engineer in Houston, and I was sleeping next to the water heater while someone else ate dinner in my dining room. Claire stood in the doorway with her hand pressed to her mouth. Her eyes moved from the cot to the bare bulb overhead to the bruise along my jaw that I hadn't been able to hide in time. "Dad." Her voice came out small and wrong. "Dad, what is happening? You have a pension and a savings account. Why are you in here? What happened to your face?" I started to say something careful, something that would make it sound manageable, but before I could, footsteps crossed the kitchen behind her. My daughter-in-law appeared in the frame. Vanessa, 34, sharp-edged, hair always perfect, wearing a silk blouse I'd never seen before that had almost certainly been charged to my visa. "Claire," she said, with the particular warmth people use when they're performing friendliness for an audience. "We didn't know you were coming." Claire turned slowly. "Where is my father sleeping?" "He prefers it in here. More privacy. Quieter." Vanessa smiled. "You know how dads are. That bruise on his face? Where did it come from?" "He fell." "I didn't fall," I said. The silence that followed had weight to it. Claire turned back to me, and I watched her register everything. Not just the cot and the bruise, but what lay beneath it. The thinness in my face, the way I held my left arm slightly elevated because the shoulder still ached from 2 weeks ago. The fact that I wasn't fighting back, wasn't explaining, wasn't filling the room with reassurances the way I normally would. She'd known me her entire life. She could read the absence of something in my eyes, the hollow place where my certainty used to live. She stepped into the utility room, past Vanessa, and crouched in front of me. "Dad, how long?" Her hand was warm over my wrist. I looked at Vanessa standing in the doorway. She hadn't moved. Her expression had settled into something that wasn't quite neutral, more like patience. The patience of someone who'd already decided how this would end. 2 months, I said. "In here." Claire stood. She was only 5'4", but in that moment she seemed to fill the room. She turned to face Vanessa. "Get Marcus." Vanessa tilted her chin. "Claire, I think we should all calm down before anyone says something." "Get my brother." Marcus appeared a moment later. My son, 31, heavier than he used to be, avoiding my eyes the way he had since June. There was something around his mouth that looked like guilt, wearing the mask of discomfort. "Claire," he started, "why is Dad sleeping next to the water heater?" "It's temporary. He needed somewhere while He has a bedroom. He has 3 bedrooms. This is his house." "It's complicated." Claire reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, unlocked it, held it face up in her palm. She looked at Vanessa for a long moment with the cool, methodical gaze she'd inherited from her mother, who had been an emergency room physician for 27 years before she died. "There's nothing complicated about where my father sleeps in his own home," she said. "And there's nothing temporary about a bruise that old." She nodded toward the phone. "So you have about 30 seconds to explain this before I start making calls. And you should know that I drove 8 hours to get here and I'm not tired. I'm furious. And the first call I make is to an elder law attorney I had on the phone for 40 minutes on my drive down." Vanessa's smile disappeared. "Everything I'm going to tell you, I should have told someone months ago. I know that. But shame works differently than people expect. It doesn't feel like embarrassment, exactly. It feels like fog. You know something is wrong. You know, somewhere beneath everything, that the situation you're in isn't one you chose. But the fog makes it hard to move, hard to speak, hard to see clearly enough to find the exit. The exit had just walked through my front door. Let me go back to March. That's where the trap was set. My wife Eleanor died of a stroke 4 years ago. Sudden, the way strokes often are. One morning, she was at the kitchen table with her coffee and her crossword puzzle, and by afternoon, she was gone. After 33 years of marriage, I was alone in a 4-bedroom house in Katy, Texas, managing fine on paper and privately drowning in the specific silence that comes when you've shared your life with someone and then suddenly you haven't. My pension from the engineering firm was $5,800 a month. The house was paid off. I had a modest savings account, some CDs, a small brokerage account Eleanor and I had built together over the years. I wasn't wealthy, but I was secure. The house was mine outright. The finances were manageable. I knew how to read a spreadsheet. I'd spent 31 years analyzing load-bearing structures. I was not a man who made careless decisions. Except once. Marcus and Vanessa had been married 3 years when they called in March. They were renting an apartment in Austin, and the building had been sold, and the new owners were converting the units to condominiums, and the purchase price was more than they could manage. And could they stay with me? Just temporarily. Just while they saved up for a down payment on something else. 3 months, they thought. Maybe 4. I said yes. Vanessa had been perfectly pleasant during the first month. Helpful, even. She cooked dinner twice a week, complimented the house, asked questions about Eleanor's photographs on the mantel with what seemed like genuine interest. Marcus was working remotely and seemed more relaxed than I'd seen him in years. Then in April, Vanessa started talking about my finances. She worked in financial planning, mid-level position at a wealth management firm in Austin. She knew things, she said. She could help me optimize my retirement. Had I considered a unified family account structure? It would simplify everything, reduce administrative overhead, make sure nothing fell through the cracks as I got older. I told her I was managing fine. She agreed pleasantly and didn't push. But she brought it up again a week later, slightly differently, and then again 2 weeks after that. Each time, the framing shifted. The first conversation was about optimization. The second was about security. The third was about what would happen if I had a health event and couldn't manage my own accounts. That third one landed differently. Because Eleanor had died unexpectedly. Because I was 63 and alone, and I thought about health events more than I used to. In May, she set papers on the kitchen table after dinner. She'd had them prepared by a paralegal she knew from work. It was a financial power of attorney, she explained. Broad authority for her to manage my accounts if I became incapacitated. Standard document. Her grandmother had one. Very common for people my age living alone. Marcus sat beside her, nodding along. It'll be a relief, Dad. Nobody to worry about anything. I should have read every word. I should have taken it to my own attorney. I should have called Claire before signing anything. I'd spent 31 years telling clients never to approve a structural change without independent review. And then I sat at my own kitchen table and signed 4 pages and initialed 7 places without doing any of those things. The fog was already there by May, I think. I just hadn't named it yet. June was when I began to notice. A credit card statement arrived for an account I didn't recognize. I called the bank and discovered Vanessa had opened it under the financial power of attorney, listing herself as a joint account holder. $3,000 in charges. Clothing, spa services, a weekend hotel reservation in San Antonio. I confronted Marcus privately, without Vanessa in the room. He told me it was a misunderstanding, that Vanessa was managing everything responsibly, that the account was for household expenses, and he'd look into the charges. He looked tired when he said it. Not quite lying, but not quite truthful. The particular expression of someone who already knows the answer and doesn't want to say it out loud. The charges continued. In July, I checked my brokerage account and found the password had been changed. When I called the firm, the representative informed me that account management had been transferred to a Vanessa Aldridge under a power of attorney document on file. Any changes would need her authorization. I sat in my kitchen after that call for a very long time. The savings account went next. I found out by trying to pay my property taxes online and discovering my login no longer worked. When I visited the bank branch in person, the manager, a young man who looked genuinely uncomfortable, showed me that the primary account holder had been updated to Vanessa's name, and mine had been moved to secondary, restricted access status. I told him there'd been a mistake. He showed me the paperwork. My signature on a document I had no memory of signing, witnessed and notarized, dated June 12th. June 12th was the afternoon Vanessa had asked me to sign several insurance-related forms, she'd said, while I was tired from a yard project and didn't have my reading glasses on the table. That evening, I asked Vanessa directly where my money was. She explained it calmly. The accounts had been consolidated for efficiency. My pension still deposited monthly, but now into the consolidated household account she managed. My property taxes would be paid from that account. My utility bills, all my expenses. I just had to ask her when I needed cash for personal things. I told her I wanted access back. She told me that was no longer how the arrangement worked. I told her I was going to call an attorney. She looked at me with that patient expression, the one I would come to know very well over the following months. She said that if I did that, the stress and conflict it would create might cause Marcus and her to reconsider whether staying in the house was working. She said that if I tried to undo the power of attorney, she would have no choice but to raise questions about my mental fitness with our family doctor. She said she'd been documenting instances of forgetfulness, some mood instability. She said these things could make a court proceeding complicated. She said all of this the way people describe weather, informational, no heat to it. I didn't call an attorney. That's the part that, even now, I find hardest to explain to people who haven't been there. Why didn't you just fight back? And the answer is, because she had my son, my finances, and the threat of a nursing home facility, and I was alone in a way I hadn't fully reckoned with yet. The fog makes it hard to see that there's still ground under your feet. August was when the utility room became my bedroom. They'd been using the guest room, my study, and my bedroom for themselves, a home office for Vanessa, a gym space for Marcus. I'd been sleeping in the fourth bedroom, the small one at the end of the hall. Then one evening, Vanessa informed me that her mother would be visiting for 6 weeks and would need that room. I could use the utility room. It wasn't ideal, she acknowledged, but it had space for a cot. I said no. The next day, a locksmith arrived. Vanessa had called him. When I asked her what she was doing, she explained that she'd changed the locks on the bedrooms for security reasons and that she'd be happy to give me the utility room key. Marcus watched this happen from across the kitchen. The bruise on my jaw was from 3 weeks into the utility room. I'd gotten up at 2 inches the morning for water and found Vanessa in the kitchen. I don't know what the disagreement was about exactly. She'd said something about how I was creating tension in the household. I'd said something back. She'd put her hand flat against my face and shoved me sideways into the counter. Not a punch, never a punch. Just enough to remind me who controlled everything. I'd been too ashamed to tell anyone. That's the setup. Now we were here. Claire didn't stay long in the utility room doorway once she understood the situation. She moved with the same efficiency her mother had, quiet and purposeful, doing several things at once. She helped me up from the cot, guided me to the kitchen table, set a glass of water in front of me. While I drank it, she photographed the cot, the space, the bruise on my jaw from multiple angles, close up and far away, with the clinical precision of someone who had decided what kind of documentation she needed. Marcus stood near the stove, watching. Vanessa had gone to the far end of the kitchen, arms crossed. Claire pulled out the chair across from me and sat down. Dad, has she touched you before the incident that caused this? Once before. Same way. My shoulder, in July. Did you document it? No. She wrote something in her phone. Who knows you've been living in here? No one. I was ashamed. She looked at me steadily. Shame is a tool they use to keep you quiet. You understand that. I know. I know that now. Marcus made a sound, half word, half exhale. Claire, look, this has gotten out of hand. I didn't know it would get this far. I thought Vanessa was just what? Claire's voice was quiet. Helping, managing things. She's good with money, I thought. Thought what, Marcus? You thought she was helping manage Dad's finances, and somehow that led to him sleeping in the utility room next to the water heater with a bruise on his face. And you thought that was still under the category of helping? Marcus sat down, put his head in his hands. Vanessa stepped forward. I think we all need to take a breath. There have been some miscommunications, some boundary issues that can easily be resolved through a calm conversation. We don't need attorneys involved in a family matter. Claire looked at her. You shoved my father into a counter. He lost his balance. I heard him tell me just now that you shoved him. He's confused. He gets confused. I've documented it. There are dates, incidents. His doctor is aware. My father is a structural engineer who spent 30 years calculating load tolerances on bridges and high rises. He is not confused. She stood up. I'm going to say this once. I drove 8 hours, and I'm not bluffing. Either you and Marcus voluntarily leave this house tonight, or I file for an emergency protective order in the morning, and you explain to a judge why a 64-year-old man has a bruise on his jaw and is sleeping next to the water heater in his paid-off house. Vanessa's patience finally cracked. That power of attorney gives me full financial authority. His accounts are structured under my management. If you try to fight that, it will take months and thousands of dollars, and your father will be here the whole time while it plays out. Claire reached into her bag and set a business card on the kitchen table, face up. Her thumb stayed on it for a moment. The name on it was Gerald Hutchins. The title below read Senior Attorney, Elder Law and Estate Litigation, Houston. Below that was a direct cell number with a handwritten note. Call anytime, Claire. I had him on the phone for 45 minutes on the drive down, Claire said. He's been doing this for 22 years. He told me that a financial power of attorney obtained through coercion is voidable. He told me that financial exploitation of an elderly person in Texas is a Class B misdemeanor minimum and can reach felony level, depending on amount. He also told me that illegal eviction from one's primary residence is actionable, and physical abuse of an elderly family member carries its own set of charges. She paused. He told me one more thing. Courts move quickly on elder abuse cases when there's physical evidence. She tapped the business card once. His cell gets calls all night. He told me to tell whoever was in the room that they should think very carefully tonight. Marcus stood from his chair, voice different when he spoke, quieter, rougher. Vanessa, we need to talk. She turned to him. Marcus, don't. No. He looked at his wife with an expression that I couldn't entirely read, but there was something in it that might have been the end of a long internal argument. This isn't what I signed up for. I went along with the financial stuff because you told me it was legitimate, that it was protecting Dad. I let it go further than I should have. But this, he gestured at the utility room, at my face. This is not what I agreed to. Don't do this right now, Vanessa said. Low and warning. We're leaving, Marcus said. Tonight. We're getting a hotel, and we'll figure out our situation from there. Her voice went cold. If you break this arrangement now, we're done with the arrangement. The kitchen was very quiet. Vanessa looked at him for a long moment, then at me, then at Claire. Whatever calculation she was running ended without a satisfactory result. She turned and walked down the hall. We heard the master bedroom door close. Marcus stood there looking older than he had any right to look at 31. Dad. His voice cracked on the single syllable. I didn't say anything. I'm sorry, he said. I let her tell me it was all above board. I let myself believe it because it was easier than fighting with her about it. That was a coward's choice, and I made it, and you're the one who paid for it. I'm sorry. You'll need to say that to a lawyer, too, Claire said. Not accusatory, just factual. Her attorney, Gerald Hutchins, will need a full account of what you knew and when. I know. He went to pack. That night, I slept in my own bed for the first time in 2 months. The sheets were from the linen closet, not the ones they'd been using, and the room smelled different, occupied by strangers for too long. But the mattress was mine, and the ceiling above me was mine, and the house was quiet, in the way that comes after a storm passes. Claire had taken the room across the hall. I heard her on the phone until past midnight, her voice low and continuous. Gerald Hutchins, probably, and possibly others. She knocked on my door at 7 in the morning with coffee and a legal pad. We need to build a timeline, she said. Everything, from the first conversation Vanessa had with you about finances to last night. Dates, amounts, what was said, who was present. I sat up and took the coffee. It was strong the way I liked it, a detail she'd remembered from 20 years of visits. She sat at the foot of the bed with her pen ready. I noticed she was still wearing yesterday's clothes. I didn't think she'd slept. Start with when they moved in, she said. So I told her. The cheerful arrival in March, the 3 suitcases, the promised timeline of 4 months, the April conversations about financial planning, each one slightly more pointed than the last. The papers in May, My signature on documents I hadn't read carefully enough. The shame of that still sharp even in the telling. The June discovery of the credit card, the July account transfer, the August locksmith, the shove in July, the shove 3 weeks ago, the utility room cot. Claire wrote everything. She asked questions the way Gerald Hutchins had probably trained her to ask them. Specific, precise, unemotional. What was the approximate dollar amount on that credit card statement? Did you retain any of those paper statements? When Vanessa redirected the pension deposits, do you recall the approximate date? The approximate amounts I could reconstruct. July pension, August pension, September partial, plus whatever had been spent from the savings account and the brokerage, amounts I didn't yet know exactly. $40,000-$50,000, maybe more. She underlined the number 3 times. Then there were the accounts themselves. The passwords changed, the access removed, the consolidation into her name. She had financial power of attorney over everything. She was primary account holder on the accounts she'd restructured. If we moved slowly, she could liquidate anything not yet moved. We need to freeze all of this today, Claire said. Gerald can file for emergency orders, financial freeze, and temporary restoration of your access. We can also file for a protective order, given the physical incidents. Will that work? Can you freeze accounts that fast? When there's documented elder financial abuse, courts in Texas can move quickly. Gerald's filing this morning. She looked up from her notes. Dad, I need to ask you something. Go ahead. Marcus. He cooperated last night. He left voluntarily. Is that who you want him to be in this? A cooperating witness? Or do you want to pursue what he knew and when? I looked at my hands around the coffee mug. Marcus was 28 when his mother died. The two of us had found our way back toward each other in the years since. Awkwardly, imperfectly, the way fathers and adult sons sometimes do. He'd let this happen. He'd closed his eyes to it and let it happen. But I also believed him when he said he hadn't understood where it was going. Cooperating witness, I said. She nodded. That's what Gerald will need him to be. At 9 in the morning, Gerald Hutchins arrived at the house. He was in his 50s, broad, with the unhurried confidence of someone who had seen these cases enough times that nothing surprised him anymore. He shook my hand with both of his and sat at the kitchen table where just 12 hours earlier I'd been standing across from Vanessa. Mr. Russell, he said, I've reviewed what your daughter sent me this morning. Tell me what you remember about signing the power of attorney document in May. I told him. He made notes. He asked about the document format, whether I'd been given a copy, whether anyone had explained the scope of the authority it granted. Did anyone explain to you that financial power of attorney can include authority to restructure account ownership? No. Vanessa said it was for emergencies, in case I had a health event and couldn't manage things myself. He wrote something down. That's a material misrepresentation. A limited power of attorney for incapacity situations does not grant authority to restructure active accounts held by a competent person. What she had you sign appears to have been a broad, durable power of attorney with immediate effect. He looked up. That's different from what she told you it was. If we can establish that discrepancy, the document may be voidable on grounds of fraudulent inducement. He outlined the steps. Emergency court filing for financial freeze, protective order application given the physical incidents, referral to adult protective services, and parallel criminal complaint to the Harris County District Attorney's Office. You should know, he said, that this process will take several weeks for the civil components. The criminal side will take longer, but the emergency orders can come through within 48 hours if the judge agrees. What about in the meantime? You have the right to be in this house. You own it. If Vanessa tries to re-enter, call police. The protective order application I'm filing today will include a temporary provision pending the hearing. He left with a copy of my timeline and my signed authorization to request financial records from the bank and brokerage. At the door, he turned back. You should know this is more common than people realize, he said. Financial exploitation of older adults is one of the most underreported crimes in this country because the shame keeps people quiet. You're not unusual in what happened to you. What is unusual is that you have someone like your daughter who moved fast and knew who to call. After he left, Claire made eggs, and I sat at my kitchen table and ate a proper breakfast for the first time in weeks. She stood at the stove with her back to me, and I watched the familiar angle of her shoulders and thought about her mother, and thought about how much she'd inherited, not just the efficiency and the medical precision, but the bone-deep refusal to leave someone alone when they needed help. "I should have called you in July," I said. She turned around. "Yes, I was ashamed." She set the spatula down and looked at me directly. "Dad, you survived your wife's death and raised 2 kids and spent 30 years doing structural analysis on buildings people live and work in. You don't have anything to be ashamed of. Someone took advantage of you. That's on them. I let them in. You extended your son hospitality. That's not the same thing." I want to say she made me feel better with that. She did, somewhat. But some things heal on their own schedule, regardless of what anyone says. Marcus called at noon. He was at a hotel in Katy. He'd spoken with his own attorney that morning and understood what cooperating as a witness meant. He could document when Vanessa had first proposed the account consolidation, what she'd told him about the power of attorney, which documents he'd seen her have me sign, and what she'd told him they were for. "I want to make this right," he said on the phone. "Whatever I can do." "Talk to Gerald," I said. "Be honest about everything, including the parts where you knew something was wrong and went along with it anyway." A long pause. "I know. I will." Claire sat across from me after the call. She was reading something on her laptop, legal documents probably. "Do you believe him?" she asked without looking up. "I believe he's ashamed. Whether that's the same thing, I don't know yet." She nodded and kept reading. Gerald called at 3 in the afternoon. Emergency orders filed with the Harris County District Court. Financial freeze application and temporary protective order pending hearing, scheduled for 10 days out. In the meantime, he'd already received preliminary confirmation from the bank that any outgoing transfers over $500 would be flagged pending review. Vanessa had attempted 3 transfers that morning before the flag went into effect. 2 to accounts Gerald didn't recognize. 1 international wire of nearly $8,000 that had been blocked. She'd known something was coming and had moved quickly. The 3rd transfer was evidence of intent to dissipate, Gerald said. That's a significant development for the criminal complaint. The 10 days before the hearing felt long. Claire stayed for the first 4, made sure I was eating properly, slept, took my medication for the blood pressure issue that had gotten worse over the summer for reasons I hadn't fully connected to the situation I was in. On the morning she left to drive back to Dallas, she stood in the driveway, and we didn't say much. "I'll be back for the hearing," she said. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." She hugged me. She was her mother's daughter in that, too. The way she held on for exactly as long as necessary, and not 1 second shorter. I stood in the driveway until her car turned at the end of the street. The 10 days alone were useful in a way I hadn't expected. I walked through the house and took stock of what had changed and what remained. Eleanor's photos were still on the mantel. They hadn't touched those. The kitchen had been rearranged, and I put it back the way it had been. I found a box in the back of the closet with my drafting tools from 30 years of work. The good set, weighted handles and precision edges, and I set them on the desk in my study where I could see them. I had several calls with Gerald. He walked me through the financial picture as the records came in. The savings account had been drawn down by $62,000 over 5 months. The brokerage account had 2 significant withdrawals totaling $41,000. The pension deposits for June, July, August, and September had all gone into the consolidated account Vanessa managed. Total estimated misappropriation was approximately $114,000. The number was large enough that I had to sit with it for a moment before I could speak. "That's a felony amount," Gerald said quietly. "In Texas, financial exploitation of elderly or disabled individuals over $100,000 carries a first-degree felony charge, which means 2 to 99 years. She didn't know it would add up that fast, I said. Maybe not. But she knew she was taking money that wasn't hers. The amount doesn't change the intent. 2 days before the hearing, I received a certified letter. Vanessa's attorney, a man named Clifford Sykes, proposing a settlement. She would return 60% of the documented amount in exchange for withdrawal of all legal actions, civil and criminal. The letter described the power of attorney as voluntarily signed and legally valid, characterized the living situation as a mutual arrangement, and referred to the physical incidents as a single, minor altercation. Minor, I read aloud to Gerald on the phone. Ignore the characterization. What matters is that they're offering to return 60%, which is an admission that something wrong occurred. If they were confident in their legal position, they wouldn't be offering anything. Do we take it? No, he said. Not unless you want to. You have a much stronger case than 60%, and the criminal complaint is separate. Accepting a civil settlement doesn't close the criminal process. I set the letter down on the kitchen table, on the same spot where I'd signed the power of attorney papers in May. 6 months ago, I'd been signing away my security without reading the fine print. Now I was looking at a settlement offer and thinking clearly about the difference between what was offered and what I was owed. No settlement, I told Gerald. Good, he said. The hearing was a Friday, 10 in the morning, Harris County Civil Courthouse. I wore the suit I'd worn to my retirement dinner, a little looser on me now than it had been, but I'd been eating properly for a week, and standing up straight felt easier than it had in months. Claire sat beside me at the plaintiff's table. Gerald on my other side. Across the aisle, Vanessa and Clifford Sykes. Vanessa's hair was different, pulled back more severely, and she'd chosen a dark conservative suit. She didn't look at me when she came in. Sykes was older than I expected, gray-haired, practiced stillness. Marcus was in the gallery. He'd driven from the hotel. When our eyes met, he nodded. I nodded back. Judge Rebecca Fontaine entered at precisely 10, mid-50s. Reading glasses pushed to the top of her head, the particular economy of movement of someone whose time is accurately valued. Gerald presented first. Timeline, documentation, financial records, the bank statements with highlighted withdrawals, the brokerage records, the power of attorney document, and Gerald's analysis of the discrepancy between what Vanessa had represented it to be and what it actually said. Dr. Paulson's medical records documenting the bruising and weight loss, with the clinical notation, presentation consistent with physical abuse and nutritional deprivation over extended period. The photographs of the utility room appeared on the courtroom screen. The cot, the water heater, the mildewed blanket, the bare bulb. Judge Fontaine studied them for a longer moment than she studied most things. "Mr. Russell," she said, "you own this property?" "Paid off, Your Honor, 11 years ago." "And this was your sleeping arrangement for approximately 2 months?" "Yes, Your Honor." She made a note. Sykes presented the defense. Voluntary power of attorney, legitimate financial management, disputed characterization of physical incidents, family dispute inappropriately escalated to legal proceedings. His voice carried the particular smooth confidence of an attorney who had negotiated a lot of settlements and believed this would be one of them. Judge Fontaine asked him a direct question. "Mr. Sykes, your client transferred $62,000 from a savings account over 5 months. What was the purpose of those withdrawals?" "Household management expenses, Your Honor." "The consolidated account structure? Please specify." "Which household expenses totaled $62,000 from a savings account in 5 months?" A brief hesitation. "Various categories. Gerald has characterized them inaccurately in his filings. The actual breakdown. Do you have the actual breakdown with you today?" A longer pause. "We can provide that documentation to the court within 30 days. Judge Fontaine took off her reading glasses and set them on the bench. "Mr. Sykes, I have before me bank records showing specific transfers to accounts held by your client personally, not to household vendors, not to service providers, but to personal accounts. I have medical documentation of physical injuries and malnutrition in a 64-year-old man living in a utility room. And I have an attempted international wire transfer of $8,000 on the morning an attorney filed for emergency financial orders." She put her glasses back on. "The 30-day documentation window isn't going to help us today." She ruled within the hour. Power of attorney voided in its entirety, obtained under misrepresentation. Full financial access restored to Mr. Russell. All consolidated accounts dissolved. All funds returned to original ownership. Restitution of $114,000. $45,000 payable within 60 days. Remainder on structured schedule with interest. Permanent protective order. No contact within 1,000 feet of my person or property. Vanessa ordered to vacate the property within 24 hours. She removed her glasses again. A gesture I'd come to understand meant she was about to say something outside the formal ruling. I'm also issuing a referral to the Harris County District Attorney's Office, she said, looking at Vanessa. The financial exploitation statute in Texas is designed specifically for situations like this one. I want to be very clear that a civil resolution here does not preclude criminal prosecution, and I will be attaching my own notes to this referral. Vanessa's face had gone still, not the controlled patience from before. Something emptier. Court adjourned. In the hallway, Marcus came out of the gallery and stood at a distance, waiting to see if I would look at him. I did. He walked over slowly and stopped a few feet away. I testified to everything I knew, he said. Gerald has it all. I didn't hold anything back. I know. I know that's not enough. I know sorry doesn't rebuild something like this. I just want you to know I'm aware of what I let happen. I looked at my son, 31 years old. He'd made a cowardly choice, and he knew it, and he would carry it. That was its own kind of consequence. Come to the house Saturday, I said. Not to move back in, just to have dinner. Something moved across his face that I recognized. Relief that the door wasn't fully closed. Saturday, he said. I'll be there. Claire stood beside me on the courthouse steps in the October sun, which is the only good kind of Texas sun, the kind that doesn't punish you for being outside. She was on her phone, typing something quickly. Gerald says the DA referral is a strong one, she said. Judge Fontaine is known for writing detailed notes when she does this. Could take several months to prosecute, but the amount and the documentation make it likely. I nodded. How are you feeling? She looked up from the phone. Strange. I'd been asked that a lot lately. Strange in the same way I'd described to her before. Like ordinary things feel unfamiliar after being taken away. You're going to feel strange for a while, she said. That's okay. The drive back to Katy was quiet. Claire had her window down slightly. Texas, October, mesquite, and dried grass smell coming through. I watched the highway and thought about Eleanor. The way I often did when things happened that she should have been there to see. She would have caught it in April, I thought. She would have asked to read the documents and would have caught it. Maybe. Or maybe Vanessa would have found a different angle. She was practiced at this. Gerald said it was a pattern, that financial exploitation of older adults by family members or intimate partners often follows a predictable escalation. Move in, establish trust, introduce financial management as help, consolidate access, restrict independence, create dependency. The house looked like itself when we pulled in. Sun on the light brick, the oak in the front yard turning color at the edges. I'd planted that tree 20 years ago, when it was still a sapling Eleanor had picked out at a nursery, arguing cheerfully about whether it would survive the clay soil. It had survived. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The light was different in October than in August. The angle lower, coming through the front windows at the kind of slant that makes familiar rooms look gold and temporary and worth paying attention to. Claire made coffee. I sat in my kitchen at my table with my own cup and watched the light move. A month later, a certified letter arrived from the Harris County District Attorney's Office. Formal notification that criminal charges had been filed. Felony financial exploitation of an elderly person, first degree, given the aggregate amount. Trial date pending. I kept that letter in the desk drawer next to my drafting tools. Another letter came the same week, handwritten, Marcus's careful print. He'd moved into his own apartment in Houston, was seeing a therapist, working through what he'd allowed himself to overlook and why. The letter didn't ask for anything, didn't explain or minimize, just said, I know this will take time. I'm not going anywhere. I love you, Dad. I read it twice, then called him on a Saturday morning. We talked for 40 minutes about nothing important. His new neighborhood, a project he was working on, a restaurant he'd tried. Normal conversation, the kind families have when they're finding their way back. In the evenings, I sat in the living room with Eleanor's photographs on the mantel and the good lamp on, and the house quiet around me, the way houses are quiet when no one is trying to take them from you. I was 64 years old. I had a paid-off house and a pension, and a daughter who drove 8 hours when I needed her, and a son who was figuring out how to be someone I could trust again. I was not naive about what had happened to me. I'd been exploited, systematically, by someone who had done her research and chosen her target and moved with patience and precision. I'd made it easier by signing things I should have read, by carrying shame instead of asking for help, by thinking that love for my son was reason enough to extend unlimited trust to the people he loved. But I'd also fought back, slowly, carefully, with the right people beside me, but I'd fought back. And the house was still mine. Structural engineers know something that most people don't fully appreciate. A building doesn't have to be perfect to stand. It has to be strong enough in the right places, at the points where the greatest stress falls. Everything else is finishing work. I'd found out where my load-bearing points were. My daughter, my son, eventually, when it mattered. The clarity that comes when you decide you're done being afraid. The rest was finishing work. I had time for that. If this story meant something to you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Eclipse Vengeance. Leave a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. There are more stories in the next video. Just click the box on the left. Thank you for being here.